Hello, so as you can tell from me wearing this Minerva hoodie, it is one, very cold where I am right now, and two, this is going to be a video about Minerva. TLDR is, if you ask me, would you do it all over again? Do you regret going to Minerva Schools? I would 100% do it again, and I don't regret going. I could just end the video there, you know. We just came to answer this one question. That could just be it, but of course it's not as simple as that, and so I thought it would be pretty interesting to provide my perspective on this because I graduated from Minerva a year and a half ago. I've had 2 jobs since graduating, one because I got laid off from COVID, but I thought it would be an interesting reflection of my time at Minerva, and also I've been spending way too much time looking through old memories and being a little nostalgia grandma. Just, I don't know, like living back my glory days, which is not super fair because as much as I frame it in my brain that Minerva is like the best time ever, I also know that what's captured on video and photos don't fully represent my experience. So this is just like a big disclaimer. This is just my experience. I don't want this to represent everybody else at Minerva's experience. I don't want to put this video out there as the Minerva experience. I just want it to be a Minerva experience. I don't want to make videos of like how to get into Minerva because honestly, like 4 years ago, was I even a like conscious human being? I don't even remember because it was 4 years ago. That's crazy. No, it wasn't 4 years ago. It was 5 years ago. That was half a decade ago. That's insane. So yeah, everything probably also changed since I applied for Minerva. So speaking of the application process, it's just not fair because it definitely is not going to represent what is the application process today. Also, when I applied for Minerva, I didn't know what I was applying for. Like, I genuinely didn't realize I was applying for Minerva. I thought I was applying for a generic scholarship to the United States. I didn't realize what Minerva was until maybe 2 weeks before I was admitted. So, that's that. But enough of like prefacing things because this is the big problem that I have even in class. I just end up prefacing what I say before I actually say it. So people are like, how about you get to your point before you preface everything? Next time I'll work better at just getting straight to the point. But I did give you a TLDR in the beginning of this video, so like, okay, so if you are watching to this point of this video and you're like, what is she even talking about? What is Minerva Schools? Well, this section is for you. So, background on Minerva Schools. What is Minerva Schools? So, at a high level, Minerva Schools is a 4-year undergraduate program that has pretty different features and they plan to disrupt higher education. A couple key features I will note. So one, it has a flipped classroom model, which means that you as a student do all your readings. So you basically consume the class material before you go to class. So the purpose of going to class is not to learn about information, but to digest and analyze and discuss with your peers and your professors what you understood from them and what you can take away from the class material. So there's no lectures, it's all seminar based, so it's very interactive. Most of the class is discussion based, which means that the whole class is participating and talking the whole time. Anyways, tangents. So that's the first feature. It follows the flipped classroom model. So all the classes take place on the Active Learning Forum. It is a software that was developed by the Minerva project to support Minerva Schools. So you can think of it as Zoom or Google Hangouts, but for class. So I think it's insane that I'm making this video now in a pandemic and people actually take classes on Zoom. So your perception of what online class is very different from my perspective because I think of online class as me taking it on the Active Learning Forum, whereas people taking it on Zoom, it's all lecture based. So it's very different with Minerva because it's seminar based. It's more like a conference call. So I think it's a max of 20 people on top of your screen and you can just see everybody's little webcams. Feels like, you know, you can see everybody's faces and reactions throughout the whole conversation, which is really exciting versus in a classroom where you would turn back or you would just see what the professor is doing. But it is also integrated with Google Docs and it's also integrated with Jupyter Notebook, I believe. But basically it has all these different integration and whiteboards and stuff where it is truly like a digital classroom. So it is not Zoom, it is not a massive open online course like a MOOC where you just click a video and you watch the lectures. It is very much a discussion-based call. So professors will call on you during the discussion to be like, hey Kai, what do you think? And even if you're not paying attention, you are now popped up on the main stage, which is the big part of the screen. You get put on the main stage and then your face is like, oh my god, I wasn't paying attention. Not that I never paid attention in class. I always did because I'm a great student. Like, what are you talking about? But in the off chance that you aren't paying attention, you get put on the big screen and you make a fool of yourself. So that fear or like the anticipation of the professor maybe calling up on you is very real, but also means that you're way more engaged in the conversation because you feel much more included rather than being like, okay, I'm just gonna sit back and let the brave people talk. Because if you're quiet and don't put up your hand, you will get cold calls. So my strategy was always to put up my hand so I don't get cold called, because I'm like, when I put up my hand, I like can at least mentally prepare what I want to say. So that was my strategy at least. Yeah, so that was a long explanation for what the ALF is, and I feel like I can go into more detail, but I don't think that's the point of this video. I just get on tangents, so I'm going to try to stay on topic. Okay, so because you're not taking classes in a physical lecture hall, we don't have a physical campus. That doesn't mean that we're an online school. Doesn't mean that I just, sit at home and take my classes. No, so Minerva, because it doesn't have any lecture halls, we are not bounded by a physical campus. It's probably fair to compare Minerva to a city-based university or college where a lot of your university is spread out across different buildings. But for us, instead of those buildings being lecture halls that the school owns, we're going to like different cafes and co-working spaces around the city. And instead of using the private university library, I go to the public library. So it doesn't have a physical campus. Every city that we're in, there is a residence hall where you stay, aka dorms, but you don't have the physical infrastructure like the libraries and the swimming pools and blah blah blah. You just use whatever's in the city. And because we're in big, large, major cities, you have all these resources kind of at the tip of your finger. Okay, so the third big feature of Minerva is the international travel rotation. So because we don't take classes in a physical classroom, we take it through the ALF. That means that we don't have a physical campus. Because we don't have a physical campus, we're not bounded by any geographical location, but it's a residential program, so you still have to stay in the dorms. Like I said, we only have the dorms as the real estate in the city. We are not bounded to that city. So to have a global experience, we actually travel to a different city every semester. So how it works is that the first year at Minerva is based in San Francisco, and in your second year, see, it changed since I've been to Minerva because I'm that old, but so it used to be that you would go to Berlin in the fall semester of your sophomore year and go to Buenos Aires in the spring semester of your sophomore year, but now it's flipped with junior year. So in junior year, I went to Seoul for my fall semester and then Hyderabad for my spring semester. And then in my senior year, I went to London for my fall semester, and we actually went back to San Francisco for our spring semester. So we were supposed to go to Taipei, but I haven't mentioned this in this video, but we were the first graduating class of Minerva. So we were the first cohort of students to test out this program, which meant that every city that we went to, we were the first people there. By the end of London, I think everybody was pretty burnt out, and the setup in Taipei was kind of not ideal. I think the setup now is very ideal, but I think when it was proposed to us, there were some issues. But so we ended up going to San Francisco. A lot of people wanted to be able to be closer to the US job market, to be able to use OPT, which is the ability to work in the US 1 or 3 years after you graduate as an international student. So there was all these things, like recruiting was definitely way more in person pre-COVID. So that was the travel rotation. I would say the last component of this is that Minerva is not a traditional US-based university. It has a very international student body. I'm pretty sure when I was working for them for marketing in Asia, the student body was about 75% non-Americans. I do think that because Minerva is still based in San Francisco and some international students still had exposure to the US culture, US education system through studying in the US for high school for a year or two. I feel like that was pretty common. A lot of people also came from international schools, so like UWC. All our classes were in English. That was a prerequisite of the university. So even though it's very international, I think if there was a dominant culture at Minerva, it was definitely American. We were a US accredited school. Our professors were predominantly American at that point. Even if they weren't American, they got their PhDs in US universities. There was no majority nationality, but if there was, it was Americans. I think it was maybe 20% to 30% of North Americans. So definitely the culture skewed American in that sense. Honestly, I feel like maybe I'll get into this later in my video. I don't know. As you can tell, this video is not planned very well, but I did try. I have a script and everything. I love improv. Oh man, I miss improv. So after I graduated, I was missing Minervans too much. There were quite a number of us in San Francisco after graduating, working our full-time jobs. And we were like, you know what? It would be really fun if we got together once a week and did improv. And it was really beautiful. And I miss those days. So we went through this whole explanation of what Minerva is. So now I will go into my reflections of Minerva. Why did that sound sarcastic? It was not supposed to be.